Okay guys, so this will be the last section of the Beaks of Finches lab video. This one won't be too terribly long, but here we are. So if you guys will go ahead and go back to assignment number 3 and open that up, you should have your lab in front of you, or should be on page 8 now. The most important part of this portion of the lab is this wheel here. I like to call it the Wheel of Fun. I mean, it's as fun as you make it. But the most important thing about the Wheel of Fun is the information that it gives you. So if we look closely at this wheel, you're going to see that there are different... Someone's making tea in my house. Okay, so tea is done. So the Wheel of Fun here has a lot of different information on it. So first of all, there's all the different types of finches around the outside. Okay? It gives you the name of the finches around the outside, and then it gives you a little cartoon of kind of what they look like. No one's really tying them to that, but this is kind of what their beaks look like. So you can see the large ground finch has a larger beak than like a warbler finch or a woodpecker finch. The next 2 rows in talk about their bills and their beaks, like what they do and what they're good at. So they might be probing, like this one's nice and pointy, so it's probing. Some of them have biting tips. Some of them are edge crushing. Those would be good for seeds with hard outer coatings, or your crushing bills. Okay, and then when you get into the center here, it talks about what they eat. So mainly plant food, mainly animal food, or this one says all animal food, I believe. Yep, it says all animal food. It's really tiny. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to think about each of these beaks as like a pie piece. So if I picked, for example, the small ground finch, this is what the small ground finch looks like. If I were to highlight, this is the characteristics that the small ground finch would have all the way into the middle. Okay, hopefully you see what I mean by that. Ooh, that makes it not really easy to see. That's okay. So the small ground finch looks like this. It comes across the edge crushing and the crushing bills section, and it eats mainly plant food. Okay, when it says it eats mainly plant food, it's pretty much plant food. It probably eats a little bit of animal food, but not very much. And same for the mainly animal food one. It probably is mostly an animal food eater. Typically, the questions that go along with this wheel are about competition between species. So which kinds of species are going to compete, which ones are going to not compete. Okay, so whenever you're answering questions about it, you just have to, it's one of those things where if you have the wheel and you know how to work the wheel, it's like free points. So the first question says, predict which species of finch would be most likely to survive if the weather on the Galapagos Islands gradually changed and the seeds available to the finches became larger with heavier coverings. So which beak up here do we think would be the best for seeds that came with larger and heavier coverings? Well, I would imagine it's one of the ones with a bigger beak, right? Because those bigger beaks are going to be able to kind of clamp down on the seeds, especially if they have heavier coatings and they're harder on the outside. So this is going to be probably the large ground finch. And of course, because it also eats mainly plant food, so you wouldn't pick an organism that eats mainly animal food because seeds are plants. Seeds are part of the plants. Animal food in most cases for birds is insects. That's what the animals are. So large ground finch, because it has the largest beak, and you want to use information from the wheel to justify your answer. So it has the largest beak, and you could say it's and it has an edge crushing beak. When you're having to explain why something is, you want to use evidence from the diagram, from the reading, from wherever you can. You want to try to pull out evidence and the specific reason why. So you want to be as specific as possible. It has an edge crushing beak. Okay. Next question says, one island is populated by 2 species. The ground finches and small tree finches. So we've got the ground finches over here and the small tree finch right here. Okay. What two types of food would you expect to be available on this island? Well, the ground finches eat what? Right, they eat mainly plant food. And the small tree finches eat what? Right, they eat mainly animal food. So you would expect that they would have both plant and animal food. Oops, sorry, I didn't realize you couldn't see that. Okay. Letter B says, would you expect the ground finches and the tree finches to compete for food on their island? So sometimes people say, well, yeah, because the finch eats mainly plant food, but that probably means it eats a little bit of animal food, and same with the finch, it eats mainly animal food, but that probably means it eats a little bit of plant food. But really, they're really going to mainly dish off of separate food sources, so they're not really going to compete for food. The ground finches are really going to want seeds, and the small tree finches are really going to want animal food, insects. Okay, so would you expect the ground finches and small tree finches to compete for food on the island? No, we would not. Well, next question says, how might two native finch populations, the ground finches and the small tree finches, we're still from this question up here, be affected if several dozen sharp-billed ground finches were to migrate to the island and survive? So again, the question is always, well, what do they eat? That's the key. What do they eat? So the sharp-billed ground finch, according to the Wheel of Fun, the sharp-billed ground finch eats what? Mainly plant food. So they're going to compete with which one? The ground finches or the tree finches. So the sharp-billed ground finch, will it compete with the other ground finches, or will it compete with the small tree finch? And the answer is that they will compete with the other ground finches because they are eating the same food. So how might the two native finch populations be affected if several dozen sharp-billed ground finches were to migrate to the island and survive? The sharp-billed ground finches will compete with the other ground finches for food. They will probably not compete with the tree finches. Okay, the sharp-billed ground finches will compete with the other ground finches for food. They will probably not compete with the tree finches. Let's say why. Because they don't eat the same food. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, the biggest thing we're always looking at is, are they going to compete for food? They might compete for other things that they need for survival. They might compete for mates if they can crossbreed. They might compete for places to live and things like that. But the big key here, especially with the Wheel of Fun, is that are they going to compete for food? That's the key. Okay. So the next question, the last two questions are on page 9. But we're probably going to need the wheel to do it, so we'll keep moving the wheel back and forth. It says, explain how an island could support large populations of both large ground finches and small ground finches. Well, large ground finches eat what? Mainly plant food. Small ground finches eat also mainly plant food. Okay, so if they both eat lots of plant foods, then an island, what would an island have to have in order to support both populations? Well, it would have to have lots of food, lots of plant food. The island would have to have lots of plant food. Okay. The last question says, how could you use the materials provided in this lab to test your explanation? Well, just like we did in the lab, you could have a large tool and a small tool, kind of like Jen and I did. We had a large tool and a small tool. They were like rubber tongs that were pretty big, and I used a clothespin. And if we had lots and lots of plant food around, then we could test it that way. Okay, so using a large tool and a small tool, have people compete when there is plenty of seeds available. Okay, so after that, those of you who are in my class, you are going to, oh, there's one more page. So first of all, normally what we would do in class is you would be given a sheet kind of like this. It looks a little different, but it's kind of like this. And we would collect data on who survived which round and what characteristics they had and things like that. Obviously, because we're doing this virtually and I'm just doing it for you with just one other person, it's not so easy to do that. But we would keep track of things like, did they move on to the new island? Did they go extinct? And what kind of characteristics did they have to get them that far? Okay, so that's the last page of the lab, and we don't have to do much with. The rest of this, I am going to create a Google form to go with this. It says Regents Exam Practice Questions. I'm going to create a Google form, and I'm going to have you guys answer these. Oh, there's only about 6 questions here. I'll have you answer those in a Google form to finish up this lab. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, happy Beaks of Finches. You're just about done.